Okay, thank you. I hope everyone had a nice lunch break. So now we move to the next session, and so the first session of the afternoon, still on the same theme. So we're still on theme two, looking at specific policies, use of PISA in specific policy areas. And this afternoon we will be discussing more specifically on the use of PISA on policies related to school segregation, progression in the education system, and and their relationship to inequity. And it is my pleasure to welcome the moderator of this session, who is Edouard Rimbaud, who's the PISA Governing Board representative for Canada. Edouard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sumaya. Welcome, everyone. So in this session, we're going to talk about segregation and inequality. So we have two examples of research that use PISA evidence to explore segregation and inequality in our school systems. So we have two papers only in this session, so more time for question discussion. So good idea to prepare your questions. We're going to have time. So without further ado, I'll invite Victor to start. So he's going to be presenting us his study on school segregation in Latin America using PISA data. Victor is from Argentinos por la Educación. And over to you, Victor.
Thank you, Edouard. Merci beaucoup. We just practiced some French. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victor Bollman. I'm the director of the Observatorio Argentinos por la Educación. It's an NGO based in Buenos Aires that aims at education become a key determinant in the public agenda. We do three things. Every 2 weeks, we publish an evidence-based report with the data team I lead. We often appear in the front page of newspapers and TV news. We also generate policy dialogue and political agreements, and we promote social demand campaigns. Before presenting the paper, I would like to thank the OECD and the PISA team, Aurelia, Sumaya, thank you, the European Commission and the Minister of Education of Croatia, and her team, Stasha, I don't know where you are, but hvala. That's the new word I learned in these few days here. Thank you for organizing this conference. So in this study, we analyzed school segregation in Latin America using PISA data, and we explored its implication for public policy and learning outcomes. The aim is to shed light on the persistent issue of segregation and its effects on educational equity, providing evidence-based recommendations for policy reform. So we begin by looking at the relationship between segregation and this is the landscape of the landscape of school segregation in Latin America. We see that the segregation is high in almost every country, and here we see the proportion of students using this dissimilarity index at the age of 15 years old by each Latin American country. And this is interpreted as the proportion of students from the poorest quartile in each country that should be transferred to another school so that all schools have the same socioeconomic level. This is measured by the ESCS index provided in the public database of PISA. And we see that inequality is high, in some countries higher than others, but in some places also has reduced the index. A special topic in Latin America is private schooling. I know maybe in European countries, for more developed countries, private schooling is not that important, but in Latin America, elite students tend to go to private schools. So we wanted to see also how private schools affect inequality. And in this graph, we'll see that while private school enrollment decreased from 2012 to 2022, segregation between public and private sectors increased. This suggests, we talked about correlation and causality in the previous panel, but this suggests that private schools contribute more to overall segregation, even as fewer students attend them. This trend points to increased socioeconomic homogeneity in public schools and the creation of a distinct elite in private education. You can see Chile is an outlier in the Latin American landscape, and in Chile there's a different maybe situation than in other countries that we can discuss further. We also see this graph, and we wanted to point out this to look at the relationship between segregation and learning outcomes. So here we see a socioeconomic level of socioeconomic level of the school here, and we see like the Gini index of the school in the y-axis, and we see this kind of Kuznets curve. Some of you maybe took some economics course. The Kuznets curve relates GDP and economic growth. So we see this pattern here where low socioeconomic level of schools maybe tend to have a lower Gini, then increased, and then goes down again. Here we see the same trend for different countries. I will point out some examples. So this is Argentina. The orange points are public schools. The green points are private schools, and like 100% private schools. And the pink dots are private schools with public subsidies. Okay. So this trend here is also the same for the whole Latin America countries, the 12 Latin American countries we saw. Mainly this shape. This is Argentina. This is Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Uruguay, and Peru. Mexico also has the similar shape, and Panama as well. We can share this later if you're interested in specific countries, but I wanted just to point out that the trend tends to be similar in all Latin American countries participating in PISA. So thank you very much. Before passing to the next speaker, just some conclusions from the analysis that I would like to highlight. So first, while the average academic performance is essential, and we spoke a lot about academic performance in different PISA countries, and that's of course very important, reducing the score dispersion is equally important for achieving educational equity. Second, schools with different or heterogeneous socioeconomic compositions, so those that mix students from different backgrounds, offer significant advantages, including fostering social cohesion and equalizing opportunities. And third, at least in Latin America, it appears that policymakers face a trade-off. So we have high-performing, homogeneous schools that may coexist with more equitable, heterogeneous schools. So this challenge lies in finding a balance that maximizes both performance and equity. So tackling segregation isn't just about moving students around. It requires a comprehensive approach that includes improving public school quality, encouraging diversity within schools, and rethinking the role of private education. Only by addressing these challenges directly, we can build education systems that truly foster equity and social cohesion. So thank you for your attention. I look forward to discussing these findings and exploring how public policy can address school segregation to ensure equitable learning outcomes for all students. Thank you very much. Hvala.
Thanks a lot, Victor. Our second paper will be presented by Mojca Stras from the Ministry of Education in Slovenia. She's going to be talking to us about the transition from lower to upper secondaries in Slovenia and how it relates to equity. So this is joint work with her colleague Gasper Kankar, who is present here. Up to you, Mojca.
Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo. And thank you for this opportunity to show you our results, our discussion we have back home. So I will just jump right in. Let me see, this works. Yes, first of all, a little bit about the education system in Slovenia. Those who have been in other presentations from Slovenia have also seen some of it. Just shortly, because I'm talking between ISCEN 2 and ISCEN 3, at the right-hand side, you can see we have about 450 schools in ISCEN 2, 200,000 students altogether, and 20,000 teachers, rounded numbers. And in ISCEN 3, we have 150 schools, 80,000 students, and 8,000 teachers. So not a large system, but still there are some countries similar to this. Here I'm showing what I call a map of international large-scale assessments in Slovenia. So to the vertical side, we have grades of ISCEN 2 and ISCEN 3. And then on the top, we have years. And the yellow squares show where individual particular study has been done. Those who are familiar with the studies, you recognize them. So we have done quite a few of them in grade 4, TIMSS and PEARLS. In grade 8, we have TIMSS, ICCS, ICILS. Those there are known. Some of them we didn't do. Some of the rounds we have skipped, but we are trying to preserve the major core. And of course, in the first grade of our ISCEN 3, grade 10, we conduct PISA. And sometimes at the later grade, also some TIMSS advanced study, you may remember, has been conducted. Our regular assessments have also national assessments been mentioned, like National Assessment of Knowledge, marked here as NPZ. This is in our language. It's in grade 3, 6, and 9. And also at grade 13, at the end of ISCEN 3, we have Matura. So when we talk about equity in our education system, we talk about equity in ISCEN 1 and 2 together, because this is compulsory system, equity in ISCEN 3, because this is different schools where students transfer. And what we were particularly interested in this analysis is equity in this transition from ISCEN 2 and ISCEN 3. But let's first talk a little bit what we know about equity. First of all, the concept of equity, I will not go into it. I'm just trying to let you know that it is a broad field. We have different views. I'm just stating here something I like that our colleagues from OECD wrote in the PISA Volume 1, that equity-oriented policies should help all students become the best versions of themselves. That would be something, of course, we would like to be incorporated in all our measures and indicators and everything to see that, actually. But we have different ideas how to approach seeing equity, so measurement of equity. We have different dimensions usually. For example, in PISA, we often look at gender, socioeconomic background, immigration status, and also one can think of other things, but I will not really do this theoretically. We also have many measures of equity. I will use in this presentation the two that are sort of famous, often used, or are well known. Proportion of variance in achievement between schools, as compared to within schools, and proportion of variance in achievement explained by socioeconomic background, like socioeconomic gradient that is called. Let's first look what we know about equity in ISCET 3, where PISA is able to tell us something about. So if we look at PISA 22 results, we know that proportion of variance in mathematics, in achievement mathematics between schools is 45%. So 55% is within schools, but this is a little bit have to be contextualized. So we have two notes in PISA volume where we have this measure given. So this is sort of as a percentage of average total variation in mathematics performance across OECD countries. Doesn't really, don't need to go into this in depth. But the second note, it says, in some countries and economies, sub-unities within schools were sampled instead of schools, which is also the case for Slovenia, which means, as we can tell, that 45% is actually overestimated. What we can rely on is when we look at the results of Matura, where Gaspar was helping me to find these numbers, that Matura is carried out in general track of the schools as opposed to vocational. This kind of Matura, so we call it general Matura, shows that between schools, if we look at different achievements, is about 15%. So most variation between our general ISCET 3 schools is still between students, so within schools. We can talk about equity in ISCET 3 system in our country also compared to other countries from PISA volume results. This is directly, as it says, from the documents. The red circle shows where Slovenia lies. What I'm trying to tell here is that Slovenia is near to the OECD average. The lines marked vertical and horizontal show where OECD averages of achievement and of the strength of the socioeconomic gradient, meaning the proportion of variance explained by the socioeconomic background is about average. So Slovenia is similar to the OECD average, not much worse or much better, but about average. And another similar graph I can show, this shows the comparison of the slope and the strength of the socioeconomic gradient, like when we do regression analysis, how much of change we can expect that a change in socioeconomic gradient or background will show in achievement compared to the strength, as I mentioned, of the socioeconomic gradient. And these two are actually related. You can see for all countries, we can see that if one indicator shows high equity, also the other indicator shows high equity and vice versa. But Slovenia, again, here with both indicators shows about average equity of ISCET 3. That's my basic point. So is there a delay? Okay, yeah. So what do we know about equity in compulsory level education? We can also use the international large-scale assessments, where overall, generally from Pearl's teams, ICIS, ICLS, we see that the variance between schools is about 10%. So majority of variance is between students within schools. And Slovenia is consistently one of the countries with lowest proportions of variance in achievement between schools. So we could call Slovenian system quite equitable system. We see here that socioeconomic gradient, which we could get from ICCS and ICIS, is also about similar as we see it in PISA, about 15% strength, which means 15% of variance in achievement is explained by socioeconomic background of students, as it is measured in the study. It could be a bit different and so on. But also, again, we have national data about national assessment of knowledge, that NPZ that I showed. And in grade 6 and 9, we see for the last 5 years, this variance between schools also ranging around 10% or even below, which means, yes, we can confirm that according to these indicators, we can call our education system at this level also quite equitable. But however, individual achievement is important for transition from one level to the other. So if we first look at how this transition is done, from ISCET 1 and 2, where everything is compulsory for everyone, so the schools are the same, we progress to ISCET 3, where we have 3 major programs, educational programs that students can choose from. So one is general, 4-year program. The other, VET professional, we call, is a 4-year program again, and VET vocational is 2 to 3-year program. And students, of course, with help of their parents, then choose which program they want to enter. And basically the transition rate is 100%, but there are some schools which get over desired enrollment, so they need to make a selection. And this selection is done until last school year. It was done, thank you, but based on final grades only. With this year onwards, it will include also this NPZ achievement. Just to let you know. So let's first look at who enters different ISCET 3 programs. What we did here is we took PISA achievement, which is in the first grade of ISCET 3. But as we said, okay, let's look who is based on PISA achievement, where students are. And this is now divided by gender, so boys and girls are separated. So the first bars on top show students who achieved the highest 2 levels in PISA, 5 and 6, so very high achieving students. Most of them are in general program, which is blue bar. But some of them, especially boys, are already in the VET professional programs, especially boys. If we go 1 level below, which is level 4 in PISA, so high achieving students, not totally the highest, but high achieving students, less of them are in general program and more of them are already in VET programs. But again, we see this difference between boys and girls. So if we go down the other levels, of course, more students go into also VET vocational programs, which is the green part of the bar. But still, what I wanted to show here is that this is happening to some extent. It is as expected, but there is some striking difference between the 2 genders. So we have quite many more girls in our general programs than boys. But then if we separate this according to the socioeconomic background that students reported in PISA, we can see, and this division was done by the 3 groups, the thirds of the distribution of the socioeconomic background. We have, for example, for the boys, the highest 3 bars show separately the highest socioeconomic background, middle, and the lower socioeconomic background. And with all the levels and both genders, with these yellow lines, I tried to show this striking difference that even though students have the same achievement, at least the same level of achievement, there is difference based on student background, which program they entered. And this was quite an interesting finding from this, and we wanted to look this a little bit further. And we did first analysis from already known sources, like what are the completion rates from the ISCET 3. This is from Education at a Glance from this year, where we also can see for Slovenia that based on student background, we have different completion rates. So background does seem to have some impact. And also, if we look at where do students go from ISCET 3 programs, so from vocational Matura, they go to a specific, mostly to specific ISCET 6 programs, so tertiary programs, but these programs do not obviously give them so much success rate. We only have 39 of VET entrants completing these programs whenever they decide to enter the tertiary program. So this was a bit disappointing. And our thoughts were that possibly these VET professional programs are not equipping students sufficiently to be successful in tertiary level when they decide to enter them. So transition from ISCE 2 to ISCE 3 may actually influence transition further on. Instead of an intended open path system so that students can change their educational trajectories whenever they decide based on their current achievement at all stages, it seems that actually socioeconomic background may actually strengthen its impact. So we further tried to examine this relationship of socioeconomic background in this first transition from ISCE 2 to ISCE 3. And what we did is we modeled probability with logistic regression, probability of entering the general program. So this, the highest desired program, let me say generally. Again, there's my, and our results show there are a lot of numbers. I'm just going to mark here that if we modeled only the socioeconomic background, so student with a higher socioeconomic background had about 3 times more probability of entering the general program than students with lower program. But if we then entered in the model of control of achievement, mathematics achievement or reading achievement, this odds of probability of entering the desired program, the general program as considered to be desired, lowered only to 2 times probability. So this I marked here, introducing achievement as a sort of control of how socioeconomic background influences this transition didn't really help as much as we would like. So my concluding thoughts are, while national and international data indicate relatively high socioeconomic equity in education in Slovenia, student background may have unrecognized impact on the point of transition and influencing further educational trajectories. This may be because students and families from a disadvantaged background tend to choose safer paths. So our policies that are now introduced for this transition may not perhaps really help that much, that we should perhaps have policies to try to talk or support families in feeling more safer to choose the paths that are actually more appropriate for their children. Thank you.
Thank you, Moika. Now the floor is yours. If you have any questions, comments, please raise your hand. We have mics around the room that will be brought to you if you raise your hand. I will ask one question. Victor, in your results, you present us inequality. The first thing it made me think of is that usually rural schools are very different than urban schools, and I was just wondering to what extent do you know if it's the case in Latin America, and did you have the opportunity to examine how much of this segregation is related to both? So I'm thinking that this has very different policy implications, because sometimes there's segregation in the cities because they're private schools, or et cetera, but sometimes there's the fact too that there's different levels of wealth in rural communities versus in the cities. So wanted to know what your thoughts were on that and what you had the chance to look at here.
Yeah, thank you, Edward, for the question. We looked at this specific topic in another study we did with Argentinian schools, and we found exactly what you say. Rural schools tend to be very homogeneous, and private schools, elite schools, tend to be very homogeneous. And the heterogeneity we find is higher in urban public schools. So rural are more similar. You have like similar students, and in urban schools it's little bit different, but it's true that rural schools have a different trend than public urban schools. It's true, and maybe that's a good idea that we could look in this study using PISA data, also differentiating rural schools from urban schools to have like a deeper understanding of what's happening there. Yeah.
Thank you. Annabella. Or- oh. We're having technical difficulties. Just a second. Annabella, can I give you my mic?
I'm passing Kitty, sorry. Just a question related to the one that you posed, Eduardo. You as an NGO representative, how do you look to these data and what is the type of approach of type of work you think of doing if you are not doing yet in order especially to work with these very particular schools, the public schools in urban areas, because perhaps you have a different role than us here in Jonas mainly have, because you are like a partner in the policymakers, but you are not actually in the ministries of education and the decision level. So I really would like to have these thoughts and the perspective from your type of institution. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the second question right away.
I would like to challenge the issue of equity. I'm asking whether you think that for low-performing or developing countries, whether equity is relevant or not. Because for different developing countries, for those that have high equity, that means the rich and the poor have no way to find differences in the output, which means that there's no good school at all. But for a country with less or worse equity, actually is more hopeful. That means in that low-performing country, they have some good school, which although we are not happy, they are more cater for high SES students, but there's more hope. So if you have 10 developing countries, if you look at them, I'd love to help, or there's more hope for a country that has low equity. But for those countries who have high equity, which means it's difficult to help them at all. There's no good school, even for the rich student.
Thanks a lot. Does anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I can respond. Relating to our role as an NGO, and I'm happy. I think we are the only NGO here in the conference, so I'm happy that you selected our article to present this. We publish every 2 weeks. We publish an evidence-based report. As I said before, we didn't publish this one so far, but for giving you an example of what we do. Last year, the UNESCO ERCE test results were released, and they showed that 46% of students in like third graders in Argentina could not understand basic texts. So 1 out of 2 students cannot understand basic texts, and this is terrible for a country. Argentina was the second best country in 1997 in the UNESCO test. Now we are 10th. And we published a report on that of course appeared in the media, that made some politicians feel uncomfortable. And we pushed the candidates to presidency at the time to sign an agreement with us and 200 other education organizations that if they won the presidency, they would implement a plan to improve foundational skills. we signed this agreement with 6 candidates of the presidency, from the left to the right, and all the candidates in the middle. And once Javier Milei, the actual president of Argentina, once he won, we started conversations with the government. And at the beginning of this year, he himself launched the Plan Nacional de Alfabetización, which is a national plan for foundational learning. And the 24 provinces of Argentina, because it's a federal government, also launched their 24 provincial plans for foundational learning. So I think this is a good example of how we work from an NGO based on evidenced policy reports, and we try to change and challenge politicians to deliver a better and more equitable education for all. So that's Anabella for the first question. And regarding the second question, it's true that having better schools can be a hope for schools that are not doing very well. But I think from an equity perspective, that we should try that public policies make that the lower performing schools achieve the higher performing schools. So we should try this trade-off between performance and equity shouldn't be really a trade-off. I think it's better for public policies to improve the performance of lower performing schools, so they improve their level to achieve the higher performing schools, and we achieve a better level for everyone.
Maybe I can add to that in a sense that I agree that equity in itself is not the best of indicators in a sense, but that's because you wish for every student to be top achiever basically. But when you translate that to a country's level or international level, of course, not all of them are. And then it becomes very important also the variation within the country, how much of them are top achievers, how much are not. And of course, it doesn't make sense if you have good equity results by lowering the achievement of the top achievers, basically, because that's what you can also do. You know, in a country, you can have measures which basically maybe help low achievers, but maybe you can create also obstacles for progress of top achievers for most talented part of the population, and then via that you're basically achieving good equity, but not as a country not performing well on average. So it should always be taken both indicators in together. You know, high achievement and equity is basically, well, maybe not the best approach to quality of educational system. So I think that maybe one.
Thank you. Just some more perspective on this. Like what Gaspar said, yes, equity per se as a number, like any other indicator, is quite we shouldn't use it like this. Of course, we calculate all sorts of numbers and we put all sorts of meanings on them, but they should be always seen within a context, like what both my co-presenters said. We don't like to increase equity by lowering achievement of everyone. So we always should try to look for excellence in our education systems and elsewhere, and try to achieve this excellence. But equity, in my sense, means that we try to do that for everyone, for as many as possible, and especially support those for whom these targets are not easily achievable. So avoid any systemic factors that might be an obstacle to that. And in our discussions, in our groups, working groups in our country, recently I found myself actually saying, when we talk about socioeconomic background, we shouldn't come into a fallacy to say that affluent parents should not help their children as much as possible anymore, just to make equity better for the not as affluent students. That's nonsense. Of course, every parent should help their children as much as possible. If they have resources, they should help them. But when we consider equity, we need to look for, as I said, excellence and try to systemically support everyone to make it achievable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Ides Nikes from Leuven University. A question to the Slovenian presenters about your policy prescriptions. Time was very short to present them. I don't remember you saying that it was better to postpone orientation until, say, age 16 or so. And this is the basic lesson that is drawn traditionally from PISA research on segregation and early tracking in education. So I wonder how you think about this. And another possibility is to, we used to use the image of a river with a cascade in Flanders, because we also have an early tracking system. And the image of a cascade is telling because there's definitely a difference in level or intensity of education between the general academic track, the technical, as we call it, and the vocational tracks. So yeah, a second strategy could be to reduce the gaps between, or the differences in level between the different tracks. And the third prescription could be to improve the possibility of what we call Solomon effects, that fishes could go up the cascade. And this is the case, for example, in the Netherlands. Our system is, in Flanders is very similar to the Dutch system. What we miss compared to the Dutch system is the possibility to move up from vocational to the academic track. How do you think about these kinds of reforms in your country?
Thank you.
Well, the first one, that we would delay the orientation later, I don't think it would change a lot in PISA results. It would look better in a way, because now we orientate them before and they already seem very different. But we know from our national data that 1 year before that, there was no big variation between schools. And then at PISA, we saw it because they just transferred to the new schools. And there they are self-selected in very homogeneous groups with big differences between schools. So I don't think it would matter much unless something else would be also at play. I think that what we are seeing now is, and you're sure about that, there's difference in instruction in general track and in vocational track, in level of difficulty, how demanding they are. And we have some able students also in vocational track. But as Mojca showed, when they go to university even, they are not well equipped to succeed there. So we have two confounded problems. One is the transition to the ISCET free level, and then being differentially equipped, the success at the university later on. We are allowing them to go to the university. They come there, but they don't succeed. And that we see as a problem of equity, because a system somehow didn't equip them well enough that even when they're in vocational track, and someone would argue, yes, they should primarily focus on the vocation, but still, as 3/4 of them go to university, they should also be equipped to success, to succeed there. And obviously, there's a great gap, great difference between those from general track and those from vocational track at the university. And this we would like to see addressed for some policies, hopefully for some policies that would, maybe just enable that jumping up, that they would get equipped already at the vocational track well enough to succeed.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I have one last question online. So do private schools deliver better education results in Argentina? If so, how may their policies and programs be the same, if not similar, to the public schools in the country?
Yes, if you don't account for SES background, you see the average of private schools and the average of public schools, and private schools perform better than public schools. Then once you control for SES background, still you see a difference. It's lower, but it's slightly better. And we are working now on trying to understand which are the determinants of this behavior, like what they are doing. Is it because they are a little bit more autonomous? Maybe. Is it because parents have a even for the same socioeconomic background of the children, maybe the parents have some motivation, some commitment, some desire, some decision of spending in education and not spending in something else? We don't know yet, but I hope that in the following conference of PISA, we can give some answers for that.
Thank you. So please join me in thanking our presenters once again.